One sec. Let me just get the argument.
Uh,
Yeah, let me just go here. The top. Mm, okay, the arguments in chat.
cool. Definition one is a contention type if and only if X could have members and could fail to have members. Okay. Due to a type 7, a
Type
type
T.
7 is a type T is instantiated if and only if T had at least one member.
So by instantiated, we just mean that it exists in an instance, right? So for example, I'd say that the property read is instantiated as long as there is something that actually has a property of being read. But if there are no things that have the property of being read, even though the concept might exist, it's not instantiated yet. There's no
So you're
objects that
saying
instantiated.
an object exists in an instance if it has at least one member.
No, I'm saying that the type is instantiated. So we'd say that the type is instantiated if one,
What is a
it
type?
has at least one member that exemplifies it. It's like a type could
What
be
is a type?
a set, a type could be a universal, a concept, etc., etc.,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
or a category, things like that.
For any contingent type, something could explain its instantiation. What does that mean?
We're just saying that for any contingent, for the existence of any contingent category, something could possibly explain why it exists. So we're not saying that like there's an actual explanation. We're just saying that maybe in some possible world or in some possible scenario it is explained. So it's called the restricted PSR. I'll write that down.
Well, yeah, but what if I was to say it doesn't necessarily need an explanation. Um,
Yeah,
maybe
that's
you could
fine.
have
That's not
internal
incompatible.
explanation, sure, but that's fine.
That's not incompatible with what I'm saying. Like I'm saying that
Okay,
it's not the case. My
I
argument's
understand.
compatible
Uh,
with my argument's compatible with brute facts, like brute contingent facts.
yeah,
Because we're not saying that it actually has an explanation. We're saying that it possibly has an explanation. So something could explain its
possibly has an
instantiation.
explanation.
Yeah.
Okay, contention thing could instantiation. Something could be non-contingent, but only something necessary. Something is necessary. Um, I don't get that. Something could be non-contingent. I
We're
don't
just
think
saying
something
that.
can be
We're just saying
non-contingent.
something. Obviously, okay. We're just saying that possibly, given the premises earlier, possibly something is necessary. It's just S5, but it's just a bit like with more complicated language. So it's just saying that if possibly something is necessary,
Hmm.
then it's necessary via S5. I have an argument for S5 if you want.
Wait, repeat that.
It's just saying S5, so it's saying that possibly if something is necessary, then it is necessary.
Possibly if it's necessary, but I don't think it's possible for something to contention to even be necessary, or this type
And
to
nobody's saying
be
that it's possibly
necessary.
for something. Nobody's saying that it's possible for something contingent to be necessary. That's not what I'm saying.
No, I don't. Okay, well, what are you talking about? You're saying something could be non-contingent. So you're saying for
Yeah, I'm
anything
saying
that
that there
obtains, it
is
can possibly be, yeah, it can possibly be necessary,
because
right?
yeah. So what I'm saying, okay, I just told you that non-contingent here just means it's just using more complicated language, but non-contingent just means necessary. So we're saying possibly something is necessary, and if possibly something is necessary, then necessarily it's necessary via S5.
Well, what would be the like? Don't you think that there would be some sort of contradiction in saying you can have some sort of necessity, granting that you still have some sort of members inside of it? So would you just be saying that this thing that is necessary isn't a type of any sort? It is an object. It doesn't have any members.
No, because I already told you that a type would be distinct from an object, right? So, a type would be like the overarching category set
Uh huh.
or like universal or concept, that these things are contained within. But the object isn't the type. So the type can be instantiated, but the object isn't something that's instantiated. So, however, like types can be instantiated within objects instead of like objects being things that are instantiated.
Okay. So let's go over your argument one more time. For any contingent type, something could explain its instantiation.
What did you
Being
say?
contingent, as I said, any type something could explain its instantiation. Being
Yeah.
contingent is a contingent type. Call it C.
Hmm.
Something could explain C's instantiation. Contingent things couldn't explain C's instantiation. I would disagree with that. I would disagree with four.
Okay, yeah. So if you want, I can give the justification why that's true.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so the reason why is just that we're talking about explaining the existence of the type or the existence of the category. Now, just to give you a quick example, imagine if we had the category of being red, and I said, okay, why does the category of being red even exist? Like, what's the explanation of the category of being red? And then I say, the explanation of the category of being red is a red object. Then that would seem to just be saying that the reason why the category exists is because one of the members in the category, but the member of the category can't exist prior to the existence of the category. If it did exist prior, that would be a contradiction because you're saying that something red exists, and there's no category of being red. So it wouldn't even make sense at that point. So obviously, if you have a category and the category exists and the members within the category exist, um, then something outside of the category, something external or prior to the category, needs to explain why it exists. And that's similar to the situation about contingency.
Sure, but I don't think that like goes against what I said. I literally negated your just explained your four better. Just because you explained it better doesn't mean you proved four. I said I
No,
don't
I
think
just
that
said that it's a
contingent things.
contradiction. I said it's a contradiction if you were to say that a contingent thing can explain why the category exists, because when you say that you're trying to explain the existence of the category,
Sure,
that
but it doesn't.
implies
But then it doesn't need to have a. It doesn't need to have an explanation then.
nobody's okay. Nobody's saying that it needs to have an explanation. We're saying that given the fact that in some possible world, again, which is why I'm saying that you should have read premise one more closely. We're saying that in some
I
possible
understand,
world,
but your
yeah,
argument
yeah,
is
one
trying to
sec.
prove it's necessary, but you don't have a
No,
you
I'm
don't
not
have a
saying I'm not
possible
saying that it's
conclusion. You
wait
have
wait
another
wait wait no
possibility.
you're not tracking what I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's necessary that it has an explanation. I'm saying
But
that
that's not what I
pos
said. I said
yeah
your
okay
conclusion is necessary.
yeah, and the premises follow and the conclusion follow from the premises unless you think the
I'm
argument's
saying,
invalid.
bro, I'm saying that if you are saying that the conclusion is necessary, so something necessarily exists, then you can't say that this is because it can possibly have an explanation,
Yes,
like you
it
said
is.
about
It's
contingent things.
S5. Oh my
Can
God, it's
possibly,
S5. It's
wait,
S5.
can possibly have an explanation. Just because it can possibly have an explanation doesn't mean it necessarily has an explanation.
Wait, it's okay. No, you're not understanding what I'm saying. Nobody's saying that it necessarily has an explanation, but I'm saying that given the fact that it possibly has an explanation, it means that possibly a necessary thing. So let's just say that we have the set of contingent things, and then we say that in this possible world, the set of contingent things couldn't be explained by a contingent thing. So a necessary thing has to explain the set in this possible world. Now that means that possibly a necessary thing exists. Now, if we say that possibly a necessary thing exists, then via S5 actually a necessary thing exists unless you disagree with S5, which is why I'm saying that I can give the motivation for why S5 is true. But the premises are true in virtue of S5 because we're not saying that in every possible world and the necessary being explains it. We're saying that in some possible world it does, in some possible world it doesn't. But we're not saying that in every world it has to explain it. But as long as there is at least one world where it does successfully
But I
explain it,
think that's
then
some
it
sort of
exists in all worlds.
contradiction.
Okay, how is it a contradiction?
Saying that there exists some possible world in which A is necessary, I believe that's a contradiction because you would have to say that in every possible world A is necessary. Yet you're saying in
Yeah,
some
exactly.
possible
That's
world
the
it
S5.
obtains. Yeah, but I'm saying you're saying in some possible world it obtains. Yet I thought in every possible world something necessary has to obtain. Is it contingent? Is it
Well, if
necessary?
you
What
agree
is
with
it?
S5, then yeah, if you agree with S5, then yeah. But we're saying that
That's clearly what I'm
from these
disagreeing with.
steps, yeah, okay, so you disagree with S5. Even,
A, B,
yeah,
C,
so you
one, two,
disagree with
three.
S5.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'll just give the argument for why S5 is true. One sec. That's literally all you had to say. Like, literally asked you 10 times, but whatever.
Not because I had to reread your argument. Because I was looking at the chat.
Fine. Okay, one sec.
You're crazy.
Okay.
So, Rizhan, let me be
Yeah.
clear. I'm gonna ask both of y'all just two questions. It should be like a yes or no. You're undergoing
Yeah.
restricted PSO, correct?
Yeah, I'm using the
Yep.
restricted PSR.
He's going on.
Okay, and then you're gonna be denying S5 axiom, right, Bree?
Yep.
Uh,
Okay. Let Q entail P. Okay. I'm gonna need you to read this shit out for me. Um, can you type it out in natural language, actually?
I can just say it out if you want. Yeah, I don't.
Well, I would like you to say it
I
out
feel
in
like
natural
typing out.
language.
Okay, so the first premise is just Q equals not P. So yeah, you understand that, right?
Q equals not P. I mean, yeah, like you have Q, which is like not P, another identity. I mean, I can get that sure,
Okay,
but
now would you
but I do
agree?
also have some. It also mean it also depends on what you mean, because not P is in Q, yet Q is not P. I mean, like, what do you mean, like?
What?
Because not
No,
P can
just
also
Q
be
stands for
maybe
not
hold
P.
on, but we can also have another variable here. So not P could also be maybe C. Why does it inherently also always have to be Q?
Yeah, so wait,
What?
I just need to understand. I just need to
Wait, what are
understand the
you talking
question.
about?
So you know
Exactly. We're
how
just
so
stipulating like
Q
the
equals
variable.
not P basically just means that P is
Okay.
distinct from Q. As such, if you have something that's not P, it should be
Yeah.
Q because Q is
So
not P
if Q
because they're
equals
not
not P, then
identical.
Q is
Yeah,
P.
I'm trying to say it also depends on what you mean, because why can't also C be not P if you have another, let's
What
say
did
you
you
have
say?
another variable. Let's say you have another variable C, yet C is not Q and it's not P
Wait,
either. It's distinct from both of them. But wouldn't that mean that C is
nobody's
then
saying that
not P?
Q. Wait, what did you say? Okay, so
I said
are
I'm
you
trying to
saying
get
that
clarification. Wouldn't that mean that C would also be not P in that same motivation?
it's so you're saying that not P can be multiple things because multiple things can be the negation of the proposition.
Yes.
Okay, how is this relevant?
I'm just trying to get a, what do you mean? I'm trying to get a clarification on your view. I'm trying to say, does it, are you trying to say it necessarily, Q necessarily has to be not P, or are you just saying that, oh yeah, the negation to P, or well P or Q would just be the negation of P in some way, shape, or form?
You can just
Because
say it literally doesn't matter. Like you can literally just say that Q is like the negation of P, like the Q is the actual negation of P. Like Q is the
so
antithesis
can you
of
give a
P.
real world example of this?
Real world example of what?
Of
Of a proposition having a negation?
No, because obviously, like, not P is distinct from not Q. I'm trying to tell you, can you give a real world
Okay.
example of what you mean by Q equals not P?
Yeah. IQ equals not P, we're just saying that the variable is standing in for another propositional variable. So the other propositional variable is not P, and we're saying that Q just stands in for this. Like, do you not believe that we can use variables to represent other things?
Sure, but then wouldn't that mean that C can also be not P?
No, because if you have a proposition and its negation, so we have a proposition and its negation,
So you
right?
think P is
If
the
Q,
negation to Q?
what did you say?
You think P is the
Yes, because
negation to
Q,
Q?
because Q is
Then
not
that would
P.
mean, but then that would mean Q equals P.
How would it mean that Q equals P?
No, I mean it would mean not Q equals P.
Okay. I don't
Yeah,
understand how this is relevant, but okay. Okay,
because
so
how
let me
can
just type
not
this out.
Q? Hold on,
Not
hold on,
Q
hold on, hold on.
equals
Listen,
P.
listen, listen. Yeah.
How
So
does that matter?
This doesn't even matter. Like this doesn't even matter. Like it could
But
literally go
can
either
this
way. Like
be true though? Is it was what I'm saying
okay.
by granting your first
Wait, no. Let's
like.
just go over your line of reasoning. Let's just go over your line of reasoning real quick. So you're saying that because
So I'm saying
Q
Q
equals
Q
not
equals to
P.
the negation of P. Doesn't that mean that the
Yeah.
negation of Q equals to P?
Yeah. So not Q. Let me just type this down. So not Q equals P.
Not Q equals P. Indeed.
Okay.
Wouldn't that mean that?
And let me just one sec. Okay. Then oh my God. Q equals not P, and then well, yeah, obviously that's true. I don't understand how that's relevant. Like, if Q equals not
Okay,
P, and therefore like not Q
sure.
equals
That
P,
means
like
that Q and P are mutually exclusive to one another. You cannot have a case in
yeah,
which you
fine.
have Q yet you have P, and you cannot have a case in which you have P and yet you don't have. I mean, you have Q.
Uh,
So they're
okay,
both. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Now I want you to go on with your argument.
okay. Why, we spent 5 minutes on.
Holy
Why would you
Rambo.
even, bro? Like, oh my
I'm
God,
sure
bro.
it's gonna be
Okay,
relevant in the future.
Okay. So in fact, I'll just type out in lateral language at this point, because I mean, unless you can understand modal logic, like if you can't, then I'll just type out
It's
lateral
easier for me
language.
to understand natural logic than I mean, what the fuck did I
Wait,
just say?
natural
Natural
language.
language than anything else. Like
Mm,
maybe if you were to type it out in propositional
okay.
form or predicate form, it would be way easier. Or modal form, it would be way easier for me to
Yeah,
understand it than
I
natural
can't.
language.
This is modal propositional logic. I can't type out.
I
I
know.
can't
I'm
type out
saying.
modal logic. Yeah.
I know. I'm saying it would be easier for me to like understand it if it was in natural language, but it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, wait, Kel, me and you understand like the thing, right?
Yeah, I understand it.
Okay.
This shit is funny as fuck, though.
Let Q equal not P. Like we don't even need to get on this. I don't even.
Say the okay. Let me try it. You obtain a Q such that Q is
Does not
not
P.
is the negation of P.
Need to say
This
that
would
you
be
can
the
just say
first.
let Q equals not P. You can just say let Q equals not P. You don't have to say you obtain a Q. Like, bro, it's not
Wait, so
possible.
what's the
So
argument about?
you don't think you obtain the Q? You think you
I'm
obtain
giving
a
the
Q.
argument for
So Q
S5.
doesn't exist.
No, I'm
As
not saying that.
it
I'm
says,
saying that like you
if
can simplify the
possibly
language.
necessarily
Yeah, yeah. I'm
contain.
ratting him on that.
Oh, okay, okay.
He's denying S5. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm
it's
looking.
possible that not be, and it's okay. Oh
Uncle
my God,
P
this
trying
shit's
to go
crazy.
ahead and go against all philosophers and shit.
Like, bro,
Nigga going against logic.
yeah.
Is this the same debate?
Yes, it is. It's just arriving into a lot of
Yeah,
other points.
Yeah, but this time it's his turn to prove God exists. Previously it was mine, and
yeah.
now it's his.
Did he agree?
We agreed on the proposition thing, but like we didn't agree on like what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, but I believe like the proposition thing like was the
Uh,
main dispute then.
so if not P, okay, then it must. Okay, if it is not the case, you just not like okay. If it's not the case, that it's gonna take me ages. Like, oh, it took me ages. Oh my God, bro. Yeah, you really had to ask me to like to translate this, didn't you, bro? Like you had to do
Nigga,
this
if you're
to
gonna
me.
use S5, of course. What the fuck?
Yeah, but it's not even like you denying S5, because like denying S5 is like I don't know. Like I mean you can like deny it, but to me it's just weird.
Mhm. I mean, I saw basically almost no other route, but yeah.
If it's possible that Q is true, then it's necessarily possible that Q is true. If it is okay, and then
If it's possible that Q is true, then it's necessarily possible that Q is true. I'm gonna have some fun
that's
with you,
via
Rizan. I'm gonna
that's
have some fun with
via
you, Rizan.
accessibility. He's just gonna write,
Pause.
isn't he,
What the
bro?
fuck? Pause. Yeah, no, I will read. I mean, I after the
Look, I
debate's
have an
over,
argument
like,
for accessibility as well. I have an argument for accessibility as well. What you just like, if you're gonna like attack that, that's just denying accessibility. Like I've come prepared for you. Don't think
you
I'm
came
like,
prepared, Rizan. Not prepared enough.
Prepare for that dick.
okay, I'm nearly done by the way. It's taken me a while, but
Alright, I'm gonna stop tracking for a minute because I'm gonna go do something. Somebody track for me.
so Ripple walking. Happy to get burned loose in the cab. Look back, he goes into the sky, he ain't coming back. Rah rah. My neck.
Yo, wow, I'm sorry, but like, can you hurry up or something? Like,
I'm coming, bro.
if someone's listening to the rec, bro, like, I'm sorry, but like, I hate to break it to you, bro. It's gonna be over.
If I upload the rec, I'll probably just shut it down. One,
Yo,
two,
No, no,
three,
no. I mean, like,
four,
yo,
I
five,
mean, like,
six, seven,
the people actually
3 out of my
think
friends listen to it.
Action be RIZZHAN.
two. Yeah, I mean, only two people think that. Like
No,
Secret
it's
thinks
like
that, and
I
Team
think it's
thinks
like
that.
his goons.
One, two, three.
It's always his goons.
I mean, I got like 8 people to watch the recording, and all of them said I won. So, one, two,
No, but
three.
he can just ask his goons. They're always gonna be on his side.
Okay. Let me just go back. Okay, it's nearly done. Where did I send the proof again? Oh my god. Yeah. Okay. One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7. Okay. Yeah. Done.
Uh, let me get you arguing. Like, Q, B, not P. If it is possible that Q is true, then it is necessarily possible that Q is true. I don't understand the second part. I don't think it's necessarily like I don't get it. Like,
You're just saying that
can you explain?
if it's possible, it's basically just saying that if it's possible and it's impossible, that it's a contradiction. So if something is logically possible, then it can't be logically impossible.
Okay, repeat that. Sorry, I was talking something.
Saying that if something is logically possible in one world, then it can't be logically impossible in another world. So if something does not generate a contradiction in one world, it can't
Are you
generate a
talking about
contradiction in
logically
any other
speaking?
world.
Because non-logically
Yeah, I'm
speaking,
talking
I would
about logic.
disagree. But
I'm
okay,
talking
cool.
about I'm talking about logical possibility.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay, cool. Sure, but that doesn't mean like, okay. Oh, I get what you're saying. You're basically saying that it necessarily occurs in some possible worlds.
No,
Um,
I'm saying that if it's not contradiction, then there can't be any worlds where it is a contradiction. It's like if
I
the
know,
form
but
of the property, yeah.
if okay, so if okay, you're basically let's type this out. If it is logically possible,
If
then there is no possible world in which it is logically possible.
no, logically impossible. If
Yeah,
this is
logically impossible. My fault.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hold on. Um. Cool. Mhm. Cool. Let's move on. If it is possible that P is not true, then it is necessarily possible that P is not true. Granting the prior, we would have to agree. But to say that it is necessarily possible that P is not true means that it is not possible for P is not true. What the fuck? Hold on. But to say that it is necessarily possible that P is not true means that it is not possible. That it is not possible for P to be true. So what does the fourth part mean?
So it's
I'll
saying
just go
that
ahead and code it out for you.
if it's saying that if it's possible that P is false, then it's impossible that P is true. No, it's impossible that P is impossibly false.
I'm gonna need you to reword that.
Wait, I'll just type it out. The if it's
Why you can't say it with your
possible
mouth?
that P is false,
Can't use your mouth, Wiz, huh? Pause.
if it's possible that P is false, then it's just saying that it's impossible that P if it's possible that P is false, it's possible that P is false. That's just like what it's saying.
If it's possible that P is false, then it's what?
It's saying that if it's possible that P is false, it's possible that P is false.
Oh, okay, that's just law of identity.
Yeah, so then we can go on to the next premise.
If it's possible that P is false, then. But it's saying that, but to say that it is necessarily, to say that it is necessarily possible that P is not true means that it is not possible that P is not true. So it's saying that if if it's
Yeah,
necessarily
but we already established
possible,
that possibility like entails necessary possibility. So
then
you can just translate the sentence into saying it's possible that P is false means that it's impossible that it's impossible that
is this what you're
P
saying?
is
It is
false.
impossible that P is not true.
Let me just go back to the chat one sec.
If it's possible that P is false,
If it's possible that P
if
is false.
if it's necessarily possible that
Yeah.
P isn't true,
Yeah, because
then it's
not
impossible.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if it's not the case that it is not possible, that is not possible, then it does follow that it is not possible that P is not true. Wait, so okay. Whoa, whoa,
Wait,
whoa.
is that 5? If it is
So if it is not the case that it is not possible that P is not true, then it follows that it is not possible that P is not true. What the fuck? Hold on. I need to read this a couple of times. If
yeah,
it
it,
is not the case that it is not possible, that it is not possible. So it's not possible that it's not possible. So it is possible that P is not true. Then it follows
well,
that
it's
it is
supposed to be
not
a
possible that
double
it's not true.
negation.
I don't get it. Um, isn't this like this statement doesn't even
It's
make
saying that
sense logically
it's saying
speaking?
that
No, no,
it's
no.
saying that if it's
You
possible.
said hold on. You said that if it's not the case, no, if it's yeah, if it's not the case that it is not possible, that it is not possible. So if it's not the case that it is not possible, that it's not possible, meaning that it's not the case that it's not possible. But if it's not the case that it's not possible, that it's not possible, then that means it is possible. That P is not true. Then it follows that it is not possible that P is not true. Like, doesn't
No,
the
it's saying
first half go against the second half? Like,
no, it's
am I the
saying that
only one? Like,
it's saying that um if it's saying that if it is possible, right, that it is not possible that P is not true. So just take like this. If possibly, wait, okay, yeah. If it is yeah, so if possibly, impossibly, um, if possibly, impossibly not P, then um,
yeah, I told you, I don't think that makes
impossibly, yeah,
sense.
yeah, 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 not P.
What? If possibly, impossibly not P, then impossibly not P. If it's possible that it's impossibly not P, then impossibly not P.
Yeah, so it's on it is a logical.
But granting the priors, this has to be false because you literally
No,
said
no,
that.
it's true via the first
No,
premise.
but
Because
but
if it's po
that's
okay,
clearly false because
uh,
by the third you have if it is possible that P is not true, then necessarily possible that P is not true. So you can't
wait,
have a
go back
case
to the
where it's
third. Wait, go
impossible
back to
that
the
P is
third.
not true.
Yeah,
Go
so
back to
the
the third.
third was
Yeah.
saying so is this the one that you're talking about? Oh, no, you're talking about the one above that. One sec, let me just get it. Okay, so you're talking about this one. So if it is
Yeah.
possible that okay, so it's saying that if it's possible, uh,
That P is not true, then it's necessarily possible that P is not true. But if it's necessarily possible
and
that
it's
P is not true, then it can't be impossible that P is not true. Because it's necessarily possible that P is not true.
no, because you're saying if possibly, impossibly P is not true, then P is not true. Like then impossibly P is not true.
Yeah, but it can't be
So
impossibly true that P is not true because
if
it's
it's
possibly
possible,
necessarily
no,
true that P is not true.
if it's no, no, if it's possible for P, if it's possible not P to be, if it's possible, oh my God, if it's possible that, oh my God, if possibly, if it's no, if it's if it's if it's
Go
possibly
on.
the case that it's impossible that not P is true, so if it's possibly the case that it's impossible that not P is that not P, oh my God, that
Get it
P is not
out, bro.
true,
Damn.
then it's impossible. Then it's impossible that P is not true.
Right, but if it's impossible that P is not true, then the premise that it's necessarily possible that P is not true would contradict it being possible that P is not
No,
true.
because
I
it's
mean,
a
impossible
conditional
that P is not
premise.
true.
It's a conditional
Right,
premise.
but that's
It's
the
not
issue though.
affirming.
That's the issue though.
Wait, it's not
It's still
affirming.
possible, but I thought it was necessarily
Wait,
possible.
wait, no,
So
no,
if
wait,
it's
no,
necessarily
you're not
possible, how do
understanding.
you have possibility in
You're not
another like?
understand. Wait, you're not
If it's necessarily
understanding.
possible, how do you have impossibility
Wait,
right
wait,
now?
you're not understanding. It's the conditional premise. So you're not saying that the antecedent. You don't understand that the antecedent and the consequent of a conditional can be impossible, but the conditional still be true. Like that's basic propositional logic. So we're not saying that
No,
it's
I
actually the
understand
case.
that.
Yeah.
I'm saying how is it the case that it's necessarily possible, yet it can still obtain to be impossible?
No, because we're saying that it's possible that we're saying that it's necessarily possible that it's impossible.
Oh my
We're not
god.
saying that
And
we're not saying
I'm
that
saying if it's necessarily possible that P is not true, then how can it be
but we're
necessarily
not saying that
impossible that P is not true?
necessarily
Or
possible that P
necessarily
is not true.
possible that it's impossible, yeah. Because then that would mean that if it's necessarily possible, then it's not necessarily
We're
possible
not
for it to be necessarily
we're not
impossible.
saying that it's we're not saying
That
that
creates a contradiction.
we're not affirming the possibility of it though. You're not understanding. We're not affirming the possibility of it.
Okay, like I don't care if you're not affirming the possibility of it. I'm saying that in any case where you have a not P, which is P isn't true, and it's necessarily possible that P isn't true, then you can't have in any case that it's possible that P is impossible because P, logically speaking, is possible in every case. I mean,
No,
yeah, in every case is logically possible.
no, because this is okay. What this is saying is that P is not true, right? So we understand that P is not true, so not P, and we're saying that it's impossible that not P. So it's necessary that P, because if it's impossible that not P, that implies that it's necessary that P. And if it's not possible that it's not possible that P, so that equals that if it's not possible that not P is possible, then it's the case that it's not possible that not P, and that implies necessarily P again. So we're saying that if it's not possible that not P, that implies necessarily P.
That's a shadow box, bro. Can you talk about what I said? I said that if you have a necessary possibility, and this necessary possibility is that P is not true. So let's say it's necessarily possible that P is not true. Then in no case can you have it that P is logically
Yeah, no, but
impossible. Yet you still obtain a possibility in which
say
P is
that it's possible
impossible.
that P is where did we say that it's okay, where did we say that it's possible for not P to be true?
What the fuck in the second premise, nigga? You said
It's
if it is
conditional
possible that
premise.
P is not true. No,
It's a
no, okay.
conditional
If
premise.
but don't you think that it is possible for P to not be true?
What did you say?
I said then you would be saying that it's impossible for P to be true. Because
Okay.
if it's not
So
possible that P is true, then it's
impossible.
impossible that P.
Oh.
Yeah, right. Then it's impossible that P is true.
See, okay, so wait,
But
repeat what you said.
but
If it's
hold
wait,
on.
no, repeat what you said so I can write it down. If it's impossible, that
You need to write shit down to check with him.
well, no, because I'm trying to construct a chain of reasoning for why you think what you think.
Uh huh. I mean, I was very clear about it from the start. I mean,
I don't think you're very clear.
you don't think so, Rizhan? You don't think so? um, Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't speaking. I asked you to finish what you were saying so I could write it down.
Oh, you want me to keep going on what I was saying? I was saying that you're saying that if it is possible that P is not true, then it's necessarily possible that P is not true. And you're obviously saying, well, that's a conditional. It's saying if. The conditional doesn't need to be granted. That's not something that you need to grant. But already, we can derive that, like, P, logically speaking, if it's necessarily possible that it's impossible, then that would mean that it being impossible is a possibility to begin with, because necessarily possible. But that would mean that P isn't logically contradictory, or not P isn't logically
No, it would
contradictory.
mean that it's logically contradictory.
Okay, so you think it's logically contradictory for
Wait, do
not
you think,
P to obtain.
free, we're not free, just, because, like, to help you understand it better, we can actually translate it into PWS, or possible world semantics. So, do you think
Okay.
the proposition, do you think the proposition that in world one, so in possible world one, P is a
Uh-huh.
contradiction, do you think that is a false statement?
In possible world 1, P is a
Or do
contradiction.
you think do you think that statement can never be true?
I think that it can be true, but then it would have to be true in every possible
Yeah,
world, unless you're
and
talking
that's what
about
we're saying.
nomological
That's what we're
contradictions.
saying. Yeah, that's what we're
Right,
saying.
okay, okay, but then if that's true, then it's
And then the
necessary that in all
contraposition
possible
would be
worlds.
true.
Sure, sure, but then if that's true, then it's saying that in all possible worlds, P is a contradiction.
Wait, what did you say?
I said if that's true, then in all possible worlds, P would be a contradiction unless you're talking about a synthetic or a nomological
Yeah, exactly.
contradiction,
And
but that's
so that
obviously
and
not what we're talking
exactly,
about.
and that's what we're saying.
Okay,
So
sure, that then
what
it's
I'm
not
saying is that
necessarily possible that P doesn't obtain.
wait, what did you say?
I said then it's not necessarily possible that P wouldn't obtain, but rather it's impossible that P
Yeah, but
wouldn't
I already
obtain.
told you that in premise two, when we're apparently making a claim that it's necessarily possible that P obtains, it's a conditional premise. So we're not actually saying that it's true that P obtains. We're saying if these conditions are met. So if these conditions are met, then P obtains. But it's not actually the case that P obtains because we're not
Right,
making an
but the whole
actual
point of
claim.
the second
We're making
premise,
a we're
right, but the whole
making
point of the second premise
we're making
is
a
to say,
conditional claim.
right, but the whole point of the second premise is to say that if something is possible, then it's necessarily possible. It being possible that it's logically contradictory makes it necessarily possible that it's logically contradictory. Yet, how would it obtain to be logically impossible if there's another possibility? That doesn't
No, no,
make sense
because no, no, you're not understanding. Okay, you're not
because again
understanding.
possibility concerns on about whether or not something can occur in some possible worlds. You would then be saying
You know,
it's
yeah,
necessarily
no, we're talking about
contradictory, but it's not
you're not
necessarily
understanding.
contradictory. It's possibly contradictory, but
No,
it being
you'd
possibly
only be saying
contradictory is a contradiction in
you'd only
itself.
fall into that trap if you were to say that it's only possible in that world. However, for example, let's just take like this, right? Go back to the
That you
possible
didn't
world.
try.
No, go wait, no, no, go back to the possible world example. Like, let me finish at least. Let me finish what I'm saying at least. So go back to the possible world example. If I say that in possible world one, right, P is a contradiction, then obviously in all worlds, P is a contradiction, right? That you obviously grant that
Okay,
that's obviously
listen,
true.
I want you to
But
repeat what I
when
said.
wait, what did you say?
I want you to repeat what I said. I
Okay,
don't
you
think you
said
tried.
that when we're talking about possibility, or when we're talking about whether things are true in possible worlds, you just mean that if it obtains or if it's true in at least one possible world. So if you were to say that something is necessarily possible, if you were to say that it's necessarily possible that it's impossible, that would
That's
imply that
not what
there's
I
a
said.
possibility.
Um,
Yeah, that is what you said, but
no, that's not what I
that's not
said.
what you said. You
I
can
said if something's possible and not necessary, rather just possible, then that would mean there's some possible worlds in which it is,
yeah.
yet not others. Right. But then that leads to
Repeat what you said.
but then that's a category error because then how can you conflate something that's possible with something that's necessary?
Wait, repeat what
Rather,
you
if
said.
something was
I
logically
said repeat what
contradictory,
you
then in no
said.
possible world it can be. I'm doing that. What the fuck,
I said no.
my
I
nigga?
said repeat the first part.
Repeat the first part. I don't know what you,
Yeah,
bro. I'll just start over from the start. Like
yeah, exactly.
I was saying that if you're talking about possibilities and you're saying that something can possibly be true, then you're saying it's not necessarily true, but it's possibly true. Meaning in some possible worlds it can obtain, and in other possible worlds it doesn't.
Wait, slow down, slow down,
But
slow
the
down,
issue,
slow down,
but the
slow
issue,
down. Oh my
but
God,
the
slow
issue is
down.
that when you talk about, hold on, but the issue is that when you talk about
I said slow
logical
down.
contradiction, bro, can I speak?
Wait, actually repeat what you said again. Repeat what you said again.
Oh my god, oh my god, nigga, you better conclude, bro. I'm not gonna lie,
No, just repeat what you said again so I can write it down.
this shit is not going anywhere, bro.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
I'll
once I
repeat it one
actually
last
have it
time.
written down.
Final
Okay,
time.
okay.
Final time. Okay.
Yeah.
I said
And
that to
slow
say
down this
something is
time.
possible. Okay, wait. To say something is possible is to say that it can obtain in some possible worlds, yet not in other possible worlds, because you have a
No, no,
distinction
that's
between something that is
contingent.
possible and
No, that's
necessary.
contingent. That's what
Okay.
contingent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Okay.
confusing.
Can you
Wait, no, you're
wait? Can you
confusing the
wait?
definition
Can
of.
you wait?
Wait, no,
Can you
you're
wait?
confusing the
Okay.
definition of
Speaking from
contingent and
modal
possible.
logic, that is what possible means.
No, no, it
If something is
isn't. No,
possible,
it
it
isn't.
possibly obtains it. Okay. Okay.
Wait,
Cool. We can
get me a
fact check
model
that.
philosopher who believes that. Get me a model
I
philosopher
got
who
you.
believes that. Because you're
Okay.
confusing the definition of contingent with possible.
Hold on. I
Obviously, that's the
got you.
definition
I
of
got you.
contingent, but that's not the definition of possible.
I got you.
Both contingent and necessary things are possible.
Hold on.
I
I
don't
got
even
you.
understand what you're saying here.
No, no,
Like,
no.
we're not talking
We
about
can talk about the
contingency, we're talking about
definition.
possibility.
We can talk about contingency.
You can just conflate the definitions. Like,
You're just not saying this, so you agree that previously we weren't tracking? Wow.
what?
I said you're just now saying this about the definition, so you agree you weren't previously
No.
tracking?
When I actually got time to fully, like, understand what you're
Nigga, you
saying.
been had time. Nigga, I was speaking very fucking slowly. This
Yeah,
is like my
so,
fifth time repeating myself.
I just sent a quick definition. So it says in modal logic, possible means a proposition is true in at least one possible world. So it's not saying that it's only true in one
Sure.
possible world. However, it's saying that it's at
No,
least true.
no one said it's only true in one possible world. I said it when it's
Yeah, but you're
possible.
conflating
It
the
obtains in
definition of
some
possible.
possible worlds and yet not in other possible worlds. That would
Yeah, but
include
that's not
it
what
being true in one
possibility
possible
means.
worlds. Our definitions are
When
mutually
that's
exclusive
not
to
what
one another.
possibility. That's not what possibility means. That's what contingency means. But being possible is different from being
Okay,
contingent.
I
And
understand, but
necessary
it
being.
obtains in some possible worlds, at least one possible
Wait,
world
wait,
it
wait,
does.
wait. Free. Do you
But
agree
it
that
doesn't
a
obtain in
necessary
all
being is?
possible worlds because then that would have
Wait,
it
wait,
being
wait.
necessary.
Free. Just answer this question. Do you think that a necessary being is logically possible?
I think a necessary being could be logically possible, sure.
Okay. So if it's under your definition of possible, that means that under your own definition, a necessary being can exist in some worlds and can exist and
Sure,
can fail to exist in some others.
that just makes a contradiction because how can something
Yeah,
necessary
so then your
exist
definition
in
is
one possible world
contradictory.
yet is necessary? My definition isn't contradictory. What the fuck?
Yes, it
Rather,
is.
no, rather is that the very concept of having something that's necessary or necessarily possible is entirely
But in fact,
contradictory.
bro, we can just conclude at this point, bro. Just save the
You
recording.
want to
Hey,
conclude?
I
what are
I
think
you
I've
got
done
you.
talking
enough.
about?
Yeah,
I don't
we can
think he
just
checked any
conclude.
of that. Um, we could do two debates. So first debate, we talk about like theology, of course, and I take the position that God exists. You go on the negation or whatever you want to do. And then the second debate, you take the position that God exists, and I take the negation or whatever I want to do. Does that sound fun?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So you want me to go
Yeah.
first, or do you want to take the stance that God exists first?
I mean, yeah, you can take the stance that God exists. I don't really mind.
Okay, cool. I'll just give my argument then. Give me a sec. Gotta find my argument. Okay, cool. Everything that began to exist was reduced from potentiality to actuality. That's my first premise.
Okay, so everything. Okay, what do you mean by reduced from potentiality to actuality? Do you just mean that it went from being potential to being actual?
Yeah. So obviously, before it was actual, and before it began to exist in the sense that it was actual, it was in a state of potentiality, meaning it had the potential to be actual.
Potential to be actual. Okay. So are you positing that this state of being potential is a real state, like it actually exists?
No, it's not a real state in the same sense actuality would exist, but it still has the ontology in some way. Though it's not just like actuality, it's not concrete, it's not an actual, whereas it is some sort of ontology still.
Okay, so you're positing that like there's multiple modes, or there's multiple ways that something could exist, so it could either be potential or actual.
Well, not just saying multiple ways it can exist, it simply still is. It just exists in a state of potentiality or actuality for anything that exists.
Okay, yeah, I'd be able to grant that, yeah.
Okay, cool. Premise two. That which is potentiality cannot be reduced to actuality by something in a state of potentiality. But something is either in a state of potentiality or actuality.
Okay, so you're saying that something that doesn't exist in actuality yet can't cause another thing to exist in actuality if it doesn't already exist.
Yeah, something that isn't actual can't make something potential become actual.
Okay, yeah, I can grant that.
Okay, cool. Um, where was it? Okay. Conclusion one. No. And then the part of the premise was also that something is either potentiality or actuality is already granted though. Conclusion one. Therefore, whatever is reduced from potentiality to actuality is reduced by something in a state of actuality. That's the first conclusion. P3. If there is not an infinite regress of potentiality that is actualized, then there must be a purely actual actualizer.
Okay, what do you mean by purely actual actualizer first?
A purely actual actualizer is an actualizer of potentiality that which this actualizer was never actually potential. So, for example, in the case of something that is actual, reducing potentiality to actuality, this thing that is actual still can change if it's not purely actual. because maybe how we're actual yet we can still change. Yeah, kind of like that. Yet we can also still make potential things happen. So I just lifted the 7-Up can up and I just put it back down. This is potential and actual. Whereas something purely actual, like a purely actual actualizer, it would not have any form of potentiality to begin with. It would have always been actual and would have never been potential.
Yeah, and what's the type of infinite regress that you're referring to?
An actual infinite regress. So someone may say, "Oh well, can it be potentially infinite?" Of course, it can be potentially infinite. That will still mean that there is some sort of beginning or start point that caused all these infinitely many elements after. Yet, if you were to say it's a real infinity, then I would disagree.
Okay, so you're saying that actual infinities can't exist.
Well, that's P4, but P3 is just if there is not an infinite regress of potentiality, that being like a real infinity, then there must be a first purely actual actualizer.
Okay, and so just to
Yeah,
get clear,
P3 is
so
just saying, yeah, if infinite regress isn't a case, then there exists a first purely actual actualizer. Simple.
okay, just to get clear on some of the terms, so would you say that a purely actual actualizer has active potency? Like, would you say that it's completely devoid of potency?
What do you mean by active potency?
Like, active potency is the ability to cause other things, and then passive potency is the ability to be
Yeah,
acted
active
on by other
potency.
things.
It has no
Okay.
passivity. Yeah, okay.
Okay, so it has active potency, but it doesn't have passive potency.
It has no passivity. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so if it's a case that it has active potency, and it doesn't have any passive potency, and obviously active potency just like refers to its causal power. Um, how would it be the case that it would have active potency, if active potency is not already intrinsic to it? Because if you think about it, let's say that there is a purely actual actualizer and nothing else exists. So like at that point he hadn't created anything. If that's the case, then it can't be the case that his active potency is intrinsic to the other objects because there are no other objects for his active potency to be intrinsic to. And so his active potency must be somewhere. And if it's anywhere, then it has to be within him. Like his causal power has to be intrinsic to him. So if that's the case, then that would mean that his active potency is intrinsic to him, meaning that he does have potency in some sense. So it's not purely actual. Purely actual, he does have potency in some sense.
Okay. So this was actually a big issue back then, and to like talk about like where would shoddy then be, and then came a lot of philosophers who said within God resides all potentiality. But when they say that, they don't mean within God resides all potentiality in the actual sense that he is composed of this potentiality and that is it is within God. Rather, we mean God is omnipotent. He is purely actual, so he has the ability to actualize every form of potency, anything that can be potent. So he actualizes, yet potency doesn't exist as a part of him. It's like
Yeah, I'm not
literally
saying
doesn't
like the
even exist
potency has to
actually
exist as a
speaking.
part of him. Yeah, yeah, I'm
It's
saying
not
that
even
the
actual, so
potency doesn't
yeah.
have to exist as a part of him, but yeah, the potency doesn't have to exist as a part of him. All I'm saying is that if you're saying that God can do these things, then you're indexing some kind of potency towards God or his actions, right? Because you're saying that potentially God can do X, and then potentially God can do Y. And like all I'm saying is like if you're at a point in time where there are no other objects than God, um, like it's unclear where this potency would be located if not him, because obviously it has to be a real potentiality. You
Well,
wouldn't say that it's not a
that's
real
already
potentiality that
assuming,
God can do.
but the
Wait one sec,
potency
just
doesn't exist in
to
an actual
understand,
sense, though.
just to better understand what I'm saying. You obviously have to say that it's a real potentiality that God can do these things, right? So you'd say that it's a real fact that God can do these things, and if it's a real fact that God can do these things, that would mean that there'd be a real potentiality somewhere. And obviously, if no other objects exist that we could locate that potentiality in, then that potentiality would have to be intrinsic to God.
No, okay, so potentiality does physically, materially, or exist in an actual sense, as actuality. So it wouldn't exist at a place within the actual world. Yet, it would still exist in a potential state. So then we form the distinction to say, oh, where would it be? Would it be within God? Well, would it be within another object that God created? Where would it be? Well, it wouldn't be anywhere in the actual world, actually. Rather, it would exist purely as a form of potency. So it would have no actual existence, whether that be with God, outside of God, within God, wherever. It wouldn't be in an actual world.
Wait,
It would
okay.
only
Wait,
be in
let
a
me just
potent
get some
state.
clarification. I mean, that just seems to be like a misinterpretation of what like the Aristotelian conception of act and potency was. So obviously Aristotle wouldn't say that potentiality is actuality, but he would say that potentiality actually exists. He wouldn't say that potentiality potentially exists because then that might just plunge us into a regress of us saying that this potential thing potentially exists and the potential for that potential thing to potentially exist also potentially exists and we just go into this regress. No, Aristotle would say that the potentiality does actually exist. However, it does not exist in the same concrete respects as actuality. So it's still the case that the potentiality actually exists, that there is a real potency and an actual potency that this thing can occur. So if we just go back to my point, all I'm saying is that obviously there's a real and actual potency and possibility that this thing occurs. And if we can index that to God, so for example, we can index that to God's actions and what God can do, right? So we could say that potentially God can do X, or potentially God can create the universe, potentially God can create a car. These are all potentialities that seem like to be indexed to God because obviously there are no other objects at that point in time or at a point that's called out that we can attribute this potentiality to us to like any other objects, right? So like the only thing that we can attribute this potentiality to seems to be God. And like obviously I already like explained how even though the potentiality doesn't exist in the same sense as actuality, it still actually exists. We wouldn't say that potentiality potentially exists. We still say that potentiality is a real thing. But we wouldn't say that it's a potential thing because that wouldn't make any sense. We'd say that
Okay.
we'd say that like
Well.
the
First of
objects
all,
contained within we'd say that the objects contained within the notion of potentiality potentially exist. But how would it even make sense for potentiality to potentially exist? Because that's similar to saying that potentiality is contained within the notion of potentiality, which to me doesn't make much sense.
okay. First of all, about any of the Aristotle point. I don't know what Aristotle point, like what Aristotle may have believed. So I'm not gonna argue with you upon that. What I am gonna argue upon is the argument you give for potency existing as an actual sense. About the stuff you said with the infinite regress, that would be does potency exist as a concept, and then you have the concept of potency, and the concept of the concept of the concept of potency, which leads to infinite regress. No, none of that. So before that, I would like to give a quick explanation for what potentiality would be. Um, for something to be true potential, it simply means that there's a determinate way that X could obtain, but is not yet. So
What do
it's
you mean by determinate?
isness, like determinate, like there's a way that it can be, you know? Like
Yeah.
for
So
example,
with that,
yeah, I'm gonna give an example. You're gonna see. Is thisness is still incomplete and it requires some condition that makes it realized. So, for example, a glass of water could be broken, but unless there is something that breaks it, it would remain the way it is. And so it is actual that the glass has water in it and it didn't spill out, while potentially it is broken and no water is in it anymore. Yet, if potentiality was to actually exist in that same sense, then not only would this potentiality be actual, meaning that not only would the water be spilt out and be within, not only would the glass be broken and not broken, you would also have the issue about the glass remaining the way it is and yet not remaining the way it is because apparently potentiality is actual and potentially speaking it is broken and there is no water in it, yet actually speaking the glass has water and it's not broken. As long as you could conceive of several ways something could be, then you do have the idea of actuality and potentiality. That's not us saying that potentiality exists as a concept. No, it still does exist. Yet it doesn't exist on the same state that actual things exist. So to say where would it exist, where would it exist, would it exist within God, would it exist within another object, where would potentiality exist, does it have its own dimension or some shit, all of those would be fallible because to begin with, it doesn't exist as an actual thing.
okay, are you done?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But look, obviously, and Aristotle and Aquinas talk about this as well. Obviously, something can't be both potential and actual in the same sense, right? So a glass can't be both potentially broken and actually broken. So you can't have something that's
Yeah.
both potential and actual in the same sense, but
Wait.
you can have something that's potential and actual in different senses. So I'm
Wait.
not
But
talking
you.
about them being potential and actual in the same sense. I'm simply just saying that when you have a glass and then you say that the glass is potentially broken, it's a real potential of the glass to be broken. So it's something true, actually true of this thing that it could be broken, right? It has this real potential. Now, we actually call those in philosophy, we call those dispositions, right? So a glass has certain dispositional properties which make it such that if it were to tip over, then it would break, right? So all I'm saying is just that it's a real fact of these things that they actually do have that potential to break, right? So it's a true and actual fact of the glass that it can break. Now, what I'm simply just saying is that in the case of God, it would also be a true and actual fact that God can do these actions. And so if it's a true and actual fact that God can do these actions, then obviously there must be something that makes it true that it's a true and actual fact that God can do these actions. And that's what we call potentiality. And so we'd say that the
But
potentiality could be located within the object or located within a subject, but we wouldn't say that the potentiality and the actuality are true in the same sense. So the potentiality would be located within the object,
so,
but obviously
but
it wouldn't be fully realized
I
yet. But
understand. So you're talking about something for it to be potential, there would have to be an actual fact for it to be potential. So, for example, it's an actual fact that the glass can potentially be broken. I understand.
yeah, so
Is
it's
that
an
what you're
actual
saying? Okay.
potentiality. So
Okay.
it wouldn't be like
Okay.
a
Yeah.
potential
But,
potentiality. It would be
but
actual.
the actual like fact that it can happen, we would just say that in the context of God, the actual fact that He can create creation, we would say that this actual fact is identical to God. I guess. And it's not a potent thing. It's not something that's entirely
Wait, let me just
potent
get some
or
clarification.
has.
So are you saying that, okay, let me just get some clarification. So are you saying that the fact that God can create creation is identical to God?
Yeah, because inherently speaking, that would be God's omnipotence. So I would say that God has no composition. His power is not a part of him, but rather it is him. So I would say this is
Yeah.
something similar to the act of God being identical to God. I would just affirm this,
Yeah.
I guess. I would
But
say
this
that
isn't like,
the fact that God can create creation or create anything in general would just be a part of God, or has the ability to actualize all potency would just be the same thing as God rather than a part.
yeah, but what I'm saying specifically is that obviously like a person who believes in like ADS or a person who believes in divine simplicity would obviously just be able to say that the fact that God can create creation is identical to him. But what I'm trying to get at is that if you believe that the fact that God can create creation is identical to him, and um God can create creation, that's a potential fact. It's like the existence of creation or God actually actualizing
You
creation is a potential
misunderstood what I
fact.
said.
If that's a potential fact, then that would you
You
just be saying
misunderstood
that
what I
a
said.
potential fact is located somewhere in God, or a potential fact is just
You
God, just
misunderstood what I
identical to
said,
God.
Rizan. I wasn't saying that it was the act of creating something contingent, because obviously God has the free will. So to say that would imply some sort of absence of God's free will if you were to say it was identical to him. I was talking about the very like ability to actualize all potency. That would mean that any actual fact that God can create creation would be like one of these potencies that God can actualize. So this ability or this actual fact would literally have to be God then, as it would literally be within the domain of being um what's the word for it? Being one of the potencies that God can actualize. So it's not implying any form of potency with because you're not saying that God creating the universe, or in the sense that the universe being created is what God is, but rather you're saying the very act of it is what God is. You're saying the very ability to actualize all potency is what God is.
Yeah, I know. I understand that you're saying that, but what I'm specifically saying is that, in relation to that, if you're saying that, and because again, I'm not talking about necessarily the actual fact of the God having this ability. Obviously, I can grant that God has this ability, and there's no inherent problems that generate from that. But what I'm specifically talking about is just the fact that if you have a potential fact, so if you have the fact of God creates creation, right? So God creates creation, right? And if you have the potential fact, we'd say that the potential fact of God creating creation, right, is actual.
You think
So
it's a
it's
potential
actually the
fact?
case that, wait one sec. We say that it's actually the case that God can create creation. So it's actually the case that God can create creation. Now I'm saying that if it's actually the case that God can create creation, and that's a real potentiality, that would mean that real potentiality is true of God, because it's a real potentiality that He could create creation.
Hmm. And that's one of the potencies. So you're viewing the creation of creation as something that would be in some way necessary, but that quote unquote like potency that God is creating is literally nothing more than something that's potent. Creation is nothing more than the potency that God can actualize. So it's one of the potencies that God can actualize, objectively speaking. And it's a potency that He can actualize. Yet the actual fact of Him being able to potentially actualize it doesn't apply because what God's act concerns with isn't potential, but rather is like it's necessary. Like not in the
You
sense
know,
that He
but I'm
has
not
no free
referring
will
to.
and then you fall into a mortal collapse, but like you know what I'm saying. Like it's necessary. Like it doesn't. The very notion of possibility won't even concern it.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know that. Create. Okay, I know that it's would be a potentiality for creation to be like actual. What I'm referring to is not potentiality of creation to be actual, but the potentiality of God acting to be actual. Because obviously, it's a potential fact that God does act to bring about creation. So that's what the potential fact here. And so, if
I
there's a
would disagree.
potentiality that God act, wait, what did you say?
I said I would disagree because I don't think the very notion of possibility even applies to God.
Wait,
So, for
I don't
example,
understand what you mean.
yeah. So for example, the notion of possibility is something that would concern creation, not stuff outside of it. So God creating or not creating aren't two possibilities. A possibility is a way in which the world could be, a way which creation could potentially be. So to say that the act of creation, like the very potentiality of the act of creation occurring, is nothing more than necessary, doesn't take into account that the aspect of creation, creation must exist in all possible world where creation does exist. But since it is and it's necessary to that in whichever world, possible world where creation exists, God, as He's not within creation, His free eternal decision to cause creation can't possibly be categorized by necessity or potentiality or possibility, as the act is outside of creation, while the result is in creation.
I don't think I that
Wow.
same things.
Sure, but
He's
I
saying
even
that
said that even in the sense of possibility and potentiality. I said even in the case of potentiality, I used them interchangeably. I said the notion of possibility concerns
you can
stuff inside of
that that's
creation,
fine. But
but you also have potentiality. The notion of potentiality also concerns contingent things within creation. Yet something like the eternal act of God isn't even something that's contingent to begin with, because that would imply that the creation or well the act of God had some sort of beginning. Yet I denied this because I believe the act of God is identical to God. It has
wait,
no
so you don't
beginning.
believe that the active got it? Okay, so you not believe that? Okay, so you believe that? Okay, so obviously, if the act of God is creation, it is necessary, and the act of God obviously has to be successful in every scenario in which it's initiated. Like, if you don't want to say initiated, but in every scenario which is present, which is in present, then obviously
In all possible
creation
worlds.
always has to be a product.
Yeah,
Creation always
yeah,
has to be a product of the act.
yeah. I just talked about this, Rizan. I said that in all possible worlds where creation exists, of course, creation must exist. That's a tautology. But God, as He's not within any states of creation or possibility, His free eternal decision cannot be categorized by necessity or
Wait, can you repeat the first
possibility.
sentence?
I said, yeah, in all possible worlds where creation exists, creation must exist. That's like tautologous. It's
In all
necessarily true.
possible worlds where
But
wait one sec.
as
Okay,
God, in all possible
on all
worlds,
possible worlds where creation
creation exists.
exists. No, okay.
Creation
What I'm
must
saying,
exist.
no, no. What I'm
Like,
saying is that
it's
it wouldn't just imply that there are possible worlds in which creation exists. It would imply that in every single possible world, creation
yeah, that's what
exists. So
I'm
you
getting
wouldn't be able
to.
to find a world
That,
where you
that's what I
wouldn't.
just.
Wait one sec. I'm saying that you under this view, you wouldn't be able to find a world in where it's you wouldn't be able to find a world in which creation is absent.
You would. Making a distinction between the perspective of creation and logically speaking what it would be. So I'm saying from the perspective of creation, creation must exist in all possible worlds in which creation exists. But God, as He's not within any states of possibility of creation, free decision to cause creation cannot be categorized by necessity or possibility because the act is outside of creation, while the result is inside of creation. So that would be a category.
Wait, why would I grant that? Wait, okay. Why would I grant? Okay, so are you saying something like possible worlds are creation?
No, I'm saying that in all possible worlds where creation does exist, it must exist. Whereas only from the perspective of creation, it seems like in every
Yeah,
possible
that
world,
that's
creation
not
must
that's not
exist.
that's not
Wait,
responding
wait,
to what I'm
wait,
saying.
wait, wait. No, it is because I'm saying whereas in
It
the
isn't.
perspective of creation, it seems that creation exists in all possible worlds. But that's not true because it exists in all possible worlds where creation exists, not in all possible worlds just in general, because the very notion of possibility is something that concerns creation, not stuff outside
Why
of
would I
it.
grant
God
that?
creating you think the notion of possibility isn't doesn't concern stuff outside of creation? So God creating and not creating are two
Yeah, I
possibilities.
think part. I
So God
just define. Okay,
possibility for you
wait,
that's a
wait, wait.
contradiction.
Just to wait, no, just to okay, just to understand, just for you to understand what I'm saying. I just define creation as something that has been brought into existence. Now, I think that like there's multiple things that exist, and maybe even other than God that haven't been brought into existence, right? Haven't been like actively brought into existence by some act, or by some cause, right? I think there's like multiple things that you can talk about. It's like you do understand that you can talk about there's like a distinction between the re and the dictum modality, right? So in this sense, we're talking about the
Hmm.
re modality. You do understand that modality can be applied to propositions, and obviously, propositions aren't creation. I don't see why would you grant that propositions are creation. So obviously, possibility and modality can be applied to things outside of creation, like propositions, like sets, like all those other things. So obviously, not just creating possibilities applied.
Hmm. Is that it?
Yeah.
I don't think the notion of possibility applies to stuff like propositions, as in it affects them. I
Okay.
think
So you do you not think
propositions
that two
have
plus two equals
wait
four is necessary?
that is necessary, but that's not a notion of possibility.
Yes, it is
There's no
because but
possible world
to say that
in
X
which
is
it's
necessary,
false.
you also have to say that X is possible. That's trivial.
I don't think that's true. Can you?
Yes, it is because okay, so if I say that two plus two equals four is logically necessary, and then I say that oh two plus two equals four isn't logically possible, that's obviously a contradiction. And so for something to be logically necessary, it has to be logically
No,
possible.
that's yeah. But when you say two plus two isn't four, you're not giving an actual
No, two plus two equals four.
plus two is two plus. Yeah, I know. If two plus two equals four in all possible cases, and you say, well, two plus two isn't four is a contradiction, then you're not actually giving a case in which two plus two isn't four. You're giving a false representation of a contradiction, which doesn't
You don't
even
understand
attack
what
the
I'm
point
saying.
at hand, which is necessary. Okay, but definitely not. Repeat what you said then, if I'm not understanding, and
Okay,
make
so
the
what I'm
distinction
specifically
that
saying
I
is
said and
that
what you said.
what I'm saying is that being necessary includes the notion of being possible, right? So if you say that, okay, being necessary is defined as being true in all possible situations or scenarios. For you to be possible, so it just means to to be true in at least one scenario. So even if you're true in all scenarios, you're still possible. Even if the proposition is true in all scenarios, it's still a possible proposition. And again, for something to
Sure,
be necessary, it
but that's
must be
not.
possible.
Just say
Sure, but that's
S5.
sure, but that's clearly not what we mean when we talk about the notion of possibility doesn't concern necessary. We're talking about necessary things not affected by can could. To begin with, it couldn't have been otherwise. It couldn't have been us. That's not something
I'm just
that
saying that
can.
modality, I'm just saying that possibility can be applied to these propositions.
And I told you I
Like
don't
even
think
if you don't
so.
want to speak
To
of two
what
plus two equals
propositions?
four, like
Like I believe
even if you don't want to speak of two plus two equals four, like you can speak of other propositions, right? So you could speak of like a proposition where you could say
I don't
on
think
this number
propositions
line.
change.
Wait, what did you say?
I said I don't think propositions change.
Wait,
Even if you were to, if you even
do
if
you
you
not
were
think
to
a
have a
train change truth
proposition.
value?
No, I don't think propositions can change. No, even if you were to say that
I don't know
you
what you
have a
mean by
proposition.
change. Like,
Wait,
do you
wait.
mean change truth value?
I'm explaining it. I'm explaining it. Not only that, but like speaking about possibility as well. So for example, let's say I have a proposition. I painted my room green, and I did paint my room green. Okay, and let's say 2 months have passed, and I painted my room purple. Does that mean that the proposition I painted my room green is false now? No, because I was talking about it in that specific moment, in that specific very time and second and frame in progression. My room was the color green, and so it was. So the proposition still yet isn't false. It's still true, and it never even changed. I don't think propositions
Oh,
change.
okay, so if you mean change truth value, then that's obviously false because propositions do change truth value. Like for example, because like obviously in the examples you're giving, obviously they're not going to change truth value if you just speak of them already indexed in the situations where they're obviously not going to change. Because if I say that, oh, I have like a dog, right, and I said, oh, I named the dog Milo, and I change like the name of the dog, like the dog's no longer named Milo. Obviously, if I'm still referring to the situation where I named the dog Milo, then the dog is still named Milo. But if I'm actually like constructing a timeline, I'm constructing a full timeline where I have the me naming the dog Milo and then me changing the name of the dog Milo, but from Milo. If I have a timeline, I'm not just speaking about index to that situation. I'm talking about it in the grand scheme of things, simplicity. Then obviously the it does change because at one point it was Milo, at another point it was not Milo. But obviously, if you're
Sure,
just going to
but when
speak of
you
that situation singularly, then the truth value is
that
not going to
that's
change.
what you're doing about it. That's definitely what you're doing about when you say my dog's name is Mila. You're saying right now in this current moment I've named my dog Mila. I call my dog Mila. Everyone calls my dog Mila. We know our dog is Mila. Yet when you change your dog's name, then now all of a sudden everyone calls your dog by a different name. You call your dog by a different name. That doesn't mean that the proposition you initially said about my dog's name is Mila is wrong, because at that
It's
moment,
wrong in
at
this
that
scenario
frame in
now.
time, well,
Yeah, it's wrong
yeah,
now.
but the proposition
It's
isn't
wrong now.
applying it to now. No one was saying that the proposition is wrong, like speaking of even back then. Rather, we're saying that the proposition is wrong in the
Wait,
sense that wait.
wait.
Rather, we're saying that the proposition is wrong in the sense of now that the dog's name has changed. But when we speak of the proposition that my dog's name is Mila, we're speaking about the proposition that in this current moment, before my dog's name was
Yeah, wait,
changed, it
okay.
is now Mila, obviously. So the
Wait,
proposition
okay,
never
so
even
imagine,
changed truth value.
wait, imagine you have a situation, right? And you have a situation where your dog used to be called Milo, but now it's called, let's say it's called um Free. So your dog's called Free now, right? And somebody goes up to you and says, oh, um, is that your dog Milo? And then you say, no, it's not Milo anymore. It's Free. Do you not think that person is right in correcting them, saying that you're wrong in thinking that the dog is Milo because it's now
Well, he's
Free?
saying not anymore. It's not saying that it was always
Yeah,
like this,
not
because it
anymore. So
is
then
in
the
fact,
proposition has changed.
yeah. Well, no, it hasn't, because the initial proposition, which was my dog's name is Mila, is still right because it was talking about my dog's name being Mila in the present tense.
I know, but
Obviously, if you're
then you use
talking
past
about,
tense
hold on,
indicators.
hold
You
on,
you,
but
you use
obviously, no,
you
but
use
obviously, if you're talking
operators.
about when you,
Okay.
Rizan, wait, obviously, when making that my dog's name is Mila and it'll forever be Mila, that proposition was false. Clearly speaking, it was never true to begin with because your dog's name isn't now speaking Mila.
Wait, okay, I'm saying that in those situations in which obviously you it's not going to change if you're just talking about that particular situation, then you'd use the present tense and past tense operators to decide whether the proposition would still be true. So like if I have a dog and I say that, oh, the dog's name used to be Milo, but now the dog's name is Free, obviously the proposition in that scenario, in that situation, my dog's name is Milo, is going to be false because the dog's name used to be Milo. And so obviously we use past tense and present tense operators
Yeah,
when
but now,
when the world goes under a
do you
change and the
realize? Do you
proposition has to
realize there's
adjust
a
to that change.
distinction? Do you realize in your analogy there is a distinction between my dog's name is Mila and the second proposition, my dog's name is Mila? There's a distinction between both the propositions because one proposition is talking about at a moment where the dog's name was actually Mila and true, and there's a distinct proposition in which the dog's name is now
Do you not think if
Mila,
we have a
it's
timeline
not true Mila anymore. Do you not think we have a timeline?
that
Let me just
okay,
ask
Yeah.
that topic.
Hold
one
on.
sec.
I want
Wait,
to ask you.
before
Okay, go ahead.
before I just need to ask one more question, right? So just before like people like want to like ask some questions, what I just want to say is that Obviously, if you're going to talk about that specific situation, that's fine. But I'm saying that let's say you have a 50, okay, let's say they have a timeline, and the timeline is illustrative of a 50-minute time period. And in that 50-minute time period, um, the proposition, let's say my dog is blue, is like like my proposition my dog is blue was true. Then 30 minutes later in that timeline, I painted my dog red. So then the proposition my dog is very true. On that 50-minute timeline, obviously the proposition changed truth values because now in the grand 50-minute scheme of things, the proposition my dog is blue is not a true proposition anymore because um the dog has changed color. And so what I'm saying is that obviously you can talk about in those individual situations it hasn't changed, and if you're still referring to those individual situations, it hasn't changed. But if we have a timeline, right, and we have this timeline which includes multiple situations, and obviously the truth value of the proposition would have been changed, which is what I'm talking about.
Wait, what's the topic?
Hmm?
Topic.
We're talking about whether God exists
What? How's this relevant? How did you even
because
get to
like
this?
we went on to like potentiality and actuality, then we went on to possibility and stuff.
Well,
Wait,
right now, it
chill,
seems
chill,
like you're
chill, chill.
winning this point, but
Okay,
What did you
I
say?
don't know who's winning the
right,
debate.
right,
Yeah,
right,
um,
right. But go.
no,
Shut the
so
fuck
hold
up.
on. There's
Listen.
not to the
Cal, you're still
Okay.
ass. It's been like
what the
3 years.
fuck.
Your shit, my nigga. You're not good. You can like literally
Um,
debate me after this.
but
Fucking
but
suck.
You
to
can
respond to
literally
the
debate me.
but to respond to
Someone
the
told you.
Rizan, I think you kind of repeated what you initially said. I already made the distinction between proposition that say we might just one talking about the dog being my present tense, and the other obviously the position that's true in the sense that it's talking about all possible like cases after and before, because then the proposition would obviously be false, the initial one. So yeah, to begin with, it wasn't even true if that's what you're talking about. The distinction between the proposition you say when you say that my dog's name is Mila and the second proposition you say when you say my dog's name is Mila, you didn't act that. You kind of repeated yourself. Um,
Yeah, I guess I did attack that because what I'm saying is that obviously, like again, if you have the situation and you have the situation specifically indexed that, then obviously that's fine. Like obviously you can say that. But in the case where you have cause let's go back to your example of you saying that the proposition wouldn't have been true in the first place. Well, no, that's just false because let's just like say that we contextualize a
I
proposition
made a
into a belief,
distinction with
right?
the proposition,
Wait
so
one
don't straw
sec.
man me.
Wait one sec. Yeah, I'm not gonna strawman you. Like you didn't even let me finish what I was saying. So let's just contextualize the proposition into a belief, right? And let's say that somebody believes, let's say that the dog has been painted blue, and somebody believes that the dog is blue, and for 50 minutes they believe that the dog is blue, but then at the 40-minute mark the dog was painted red, but they weren't aware that the dog was painted red. But for 50 minutes they believed that the dog was blue. Obviously initially the belief was true. So initially the belief was true. Initially, they would have been correct in believing that the dog was blue. But you wouldn't have said that the belief was not true in the first place. Obviously, there was a point in time when the belief was true. And after the dog was painted red, the belief was no longer true. So obviously the belief has changed truth value. And obviously, if propositions, even as beliefs, can change truth value, then that at least means that some propositions
Yeah,
can change truth value, which is my
position that
point.
blue, yes,
And you have to
no,
believe that the
I
belief is
believe
distinct as
the dog
well.
is blue. Stop, stop. I believe the propositions because the dog is blue is distinct from the dog is blue because one talking about referencing a specific moment in time which would be in the present as talking about another moment in time which would not be referencing the present but rather 50 minutes later. Position obviously speaking is no longer true because the dot is no longer blue. It's changed in color. So there's a distinction in the propositions rather than the distinction in their truth value. Like you just keep repeating yourself. I don't know why.
No, okay. Yeah, and I'm saying that, okay, and I'm saying that somebody believes past, present, and future that the dog is blue. So if they believe past, present, okay, so they believe in the past the dog was blue, they believe in the present the dog is blue, and they believe that in the future the dog is blue as well. And obviously, if they have that belief, the belief was obviously
Then
originally
obviously
true.
speaking, the proposition is false because beliefs are distinct from propositions. You can have a
Beliefs,
belief
okay,
yet there's
beliefs
not
are
be.
distinct from, yeah, beliefs are
Yes, a
distinct from
belief doesn't
propositions, but
have to be a
beliefs can be true.
proposition.
Yeah, I'm saying that. Yeah, that's fine. But I'm saying that a belief can be
Your
a
belief is
proposition,
false,
and some
objectively
beliefs can be.
speaking.
Yeah, wait. Let me finish. I'm saying that beliefs can be propositions and beliefs can be true or false, right? So some beliefs at least can be true or false. Now I'm saying that at one point, right, your belief was true, right? But at another point, your belief is false. And it doesn't seem that you've changed beliefs because for the proposition to change in that instance, you'd also have to change beliefs. But it doesn't actually seem in that scenario that you've changed beliefs. You've still held the same belief that the dog is blue simplicity.
Hmm.
Hold on. I have a question. Okay, so Rizhan, you said that the dog is blue at time t1. It's gonna be different from the dog is blue
Cool.
at time t. I mean, or the dog is not blue at
Um,
time t2.
sure. Just can't.
Okay, fine. I'll let him go. Oh, you have to be right back.
I'm not gonna lie, that's kind of bad.